I didn't cry at my father's funeral. Not when the organ droned through a hymn that felt older than time. Not when the casket rolled down the aisle like some silent judgment. And not even when my aunt leaned over and whispered, "He only ever loved one child, and it wasn't her." Her words landed like ice water down my spine. I felt my throat tighten. My hands trembled slightly as I clenched the memorial program. Cheap, glossy paper that crinkled beneath my grip. Then Jaime, her son, my cousin, the golden boy, let out a smug little laugh. He used to call her his biggest regret. He muttered just loud enough for the row behind us to hear. I kept my eyes on the casket. If I turned around, they'd see it. The flash of pain. And I wasn't going to give them that. Not today, maybe not ever. The casket was smooth, dark cherry wood with my father's name engraved in gold. Raymond Hale, beloved brother, father, uncle. The words blurred. Father, right? The chapel smelled of lies and melting candle wax. That thick, cloying scent that never leaves your clothes or your memory. The air was heavy, like grief had substance. I sat still, but inside I was unraveling. My heart thudded like a dull drum against my ribs. My palms were damp. Every part of me screamed to leave, to run, but I didn't. I couldn't. Aunt Vivian was staring again. She tilted her head like a curious bird, lips curled into something between pity and victory. She'd always hated me. I think she was jealous that my father and mother were once happy briefly before everything fell apart. And I think she loved watching me flinch. Next to her, Jaime leaned back, arms slung arrogantly over the pew. His confidence oozed off him. He was Raymond's favorite, the son he never had, but always claimed he'd inherited the smirk too. I used to wonder if that made my father proud. A few rows ahead, my mom sat with my brother, Kyle. She looked older than I remembered, tired, smaller, somehow. Kyle met my eyes briefly, then looked away. He always tried to stay neutral. I didn't blame him. This family made neutrality a survival skill. I swallowed the lump in my throat and focused on the priest, Father Andrews. He'd been with our family for years, baptisms, weddings, now funerals. He was speaking, though I wasn't absorbing much. Raymond's strength was in his steadfast nature, he said, his commitment to family, and I tuned out. The words didn't fit the man I knew, the man who could go days without speaking to me, the man who once told me I was too emotional, like it was a flaw to feel things deeply. This version of him, this sanitized, dignified eulogy, felt like a stranger. Then Father Andrews paused, cleared his throat. "There is one final message," he said, glancing at the congregation. "A letter left by Raymond. He asked that it be read aloud here today." The air shifted. Even the sound of rain against the stained glass windows seemed to hush. Aunt Vivian stiffened. Jaime's posture changed. My breath caught a letter. No one had mentioned a letter. I looked up and saw it. A yellowed envelope in Father Andrews' hands creased at the edges. My stomach dropped. My fingertips tingled, like my body was reacting before my brain could catch up. I wanted to stand to walk out. I could feel my pulse in my ears. But I didn't move because something inside me, something small and stubborn, needed to hear what he wrote, even if it hurt, even if it destroyed me. The priest unfolded the paper, and then he read the first line. "To those gathered here, my family, my regrets, and the daughter I never had the courage to love." Right. The room fell completely silent, and every single smile vanished. When I was 10, I learned how to disappear. Not physically, just enough to slip beneath the surface of a room. I figured out early that if I kept my voice down, if I made myself small enough, they'd forget I was there. And honestly, most of the time, they did. Walking into that funeral chapel after 7 years of silence, it felt like I'd never left. Same cracked tile underfoot, Same floral carpet that always smelled faintly like mildew and roses. Same people still, looking through me like I was nothing more than a shadow. But I wasn't the same girl who left. I had changed. I just wasn't sure anyone here could see it. My name is Era Hale. I'm 29. I live in Chicago now, far from the town I grew up in, far from him. I built a life that has nothing to do with this family on purpose. But when the call came from my brother Kyle, voice shaking as he told me, "Dad's gone." It was a stroke. It happened fast. I couldn't hang up. I couldn't ignore it. I thought I could handle it. One day back, just long enough to show my face, pay my respects, and leave before anyone remembered why they hated me. But the moment I stepped inside, I could feel the weight settle on my chest. Familiar, suffocating, that quiet tension that always hovered around my father's house, where love had conditions and silence was currency. Kyle hugged me when I arrived. His arms were tighter than I expected, like he didn't want to let go. He whispered, "I'm glad you came," and I believed him. Our mom, Lynette, offered a soft smile, polite but distant. She looked tired, worn down in the way people get when life chips away at them too slowly to notice. I hadn't seen her since I left for college. She stayed in town even after the divorce, quiet like always. I sometimes wondered if she stayed, out of fear or habit. And then there was Aunt Vivian. She spotted me from across the room like a hawk, locking eyes with prey. She didn't wave, just stared, lips curled like I was a spider on her ceiling. Vivian was my father's sister, only sibling. She'd always treated Jaime, her son, like he was royalty and made sure I knew I was the court jester. She filled the silence. My father left with snide remarks and sideways glances. Growing up, it felt like she took it as a personal mission to remind me I didn't belong. Jaime, of course, was exactly as I remembered him. Confident, polished, dressed like he was attending a political fundraiser instead of a funeral. He barely looked at me, but when he did, there was that same smirk that made me want to scream. We all sat in different sections of the chapel. Not formally, just the way people who don't speak anymore tend to organize themselves. As the service began, I watched people file in. Old neighbors, co-workers of my dad's, church members, all of them came to pay tribute to the man they thought they knew. To them, Raymond Hale was a great man, reliable, strong, principled. But to me, he was the man who never looked at my art projects, never came to a single school play, never said, "I'm proud of you." A man who once looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're just like your mother, that's not a compliment." And yet here I was sitting in this chapel wearing black, trying not to feel, trying not to remember, trying not to wonder why I still wanted to hear something, anything that proved he cared. And then the priest pulled out that letter. The moment the priest mentioned a letter, the air in the chapel changed. It was subtle, just a shift in posture, the way people leaned in, eyes narrowing with curiosity, but I felt it like a storm rolling in. Aunt Vivian turned slightly in her seat, the smugness on her face flickering with something new. Uncertainty. Jaime's fingers paused where they'd been tapping against his knee. He looked toward the pulpit, blinking slow like he didn't quite process what was happening. I, meanwhile, sat frozen. A letter? My mind raced. He never wrote to me, not when I moved out. Not when I graduated. Not even when I sent that last email. The one I stared at for 20 minutes before pressing send. The one that just said, "I'm done trying." So, what could possibly be in that letter? My throat tightened as I stared at the envelope in Father Andrew's hands. It looked old, worn, like it had been written months ago, maybe even years. He held it with both hands like it was something sacred or dangerous. I tried to steady my breathing, but my chest rose and fell in, shallow bursts. I pressed my fingers into the side of the pew, grounding myself with the wood's rough texture beneath my nails. "Don't cry," I told myself. "Don't let them see you fall apart." Vivian whispered something to Jaime. I didn't catch it, but I saw the way his lips curled afterward, like he thought he already knew what the letter would say. Probably another tribute, a parting gift to the golden boy in his perfect life. Maybe something about legacy, honor, discipline, things my father valued, at least when they were wrapped around someone else's name. Father Andrews cleared his throat. Again. I could see the sweat beating at his temple. That surprised me. He looked uncomfortable, almost nervous, which only made my stomach twist tighter. What was in that letter? Why did my hands feel cold? Why did I suddenly wish I had stayed home? Behind me, someone coughed. A small, dry sound that somehow echoed louder than anything else in the room. Everything felt magnified, the soft shuffling of feet, the creak of wooden pews. Even the rain against the stained glass windows had a rhythm now, like a countdown. Tick, tick, tick. I felt eyes on me. Kyle from across the room gave me a look, concerned. Maybe he knew something was coming. Or maybe he just knew me. He'd always been the only one who really tried to understand what growing up in our house was like for me. Mom sat rigid, hands folded so tightly in her lap, I could see her knuckles go pale. I looked back at the casket, my father's casket. It felt like he was still here, like he had orchestrated this entire thing to keep his grip on us from beyond the grave. That was just like him, controlling, methodical, always saving his big moves for when you least expected them. And now, he had the floor. Even dead, he had the final word. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But instead, I sat there and braced myself because I knew whatever was in that letter, it wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be kind. And somehow, I had the sickest feeling in my gut. It was going to be about me. I should have left. Every instinct in my body told me to get up, walk out, and never look back. I could already imagine it. Slipping through the chapel doors, the cool slap of rain against my face, the sound of my boots hitting the pavement as I disappeared into the parking lot, just like I'd disappeared before. It would have been easy. No one would have stopped me. Vivian probably would have smiled, but I didn't move. I sat there completely still as Father Andrews unfolded the letter with hands that shook just enough for me to notice. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat again. His eyes scanned the page, and for a split second he hesitated, like he was reading something he hadn't expected. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I should have left, but I couldn't, because beneath the fear, beneath the resentment and all the emotional scar tissue I'd been carrying for years, there was something else. Hope. A fragile, almost embarrassing kind of hope. I hated that it still lived inside me, even after everything. After every time he ignored me, after every cruel silence, every moment he chose someone else, chose Jamie over me. After all of it, some tiny part of me still wanted to believe he'd finally seen me. That maybe this letter, maybe it was for me, or maybe it was an apology, a confession, a truth I had waited my entire life to hear. And that scared me even more than the silence. What if it wasn't? What if it was worse? I sat, there staring at the pulpit, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the soft hum of the ceiling fans above. The priest still hadn't spoken. The room was silent, suspended in that strange tension between the past and whatever this letter was about to unleash. Jaime shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight now, eyes darting toward the letter like he wanted to snatch it and read it himself. Vivian folded her arms, trying to appear calm, but her mouth had tightened into a thin, bloodless line. I glanced down at my lap. My fingers had gone white from clenching the sides of the pew. I let go slowly, quietly, and folded my hands together to hide the tremble. You can handle this, I told myself. You've handled worse. But had I? Because this wasn't just a letter. It was the last thing my father ever chose to say. And I didn't know what was worse, being forgotten in it or being remembered. The priest finally looked up from the page. His eyes met mine. Just for a second, something flickered there. Not pity exactly, but wait. He knew. He opened his mouth to speak, and I knew this is it. This is the moment I'd been running from for years. But I didn't move. I didn't run. Because for once I wanted to face it, the pain, the truth, whatever was written on that paper. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear what my father had saved for the end. Even if it broke me, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew about him, or worse, about myself. So, I inhaled, held my breath, and waited. The first words fell into the silence like a stone into still water, to those gathered here, my family, my regrets, and the daughter I never had the courage to love. Right. I stopped breathing. It was like time folded in on itself, like everything I'd braced for had come, only in a form I never expected. All around me, I could feel the tension shift. Heads turned, eyes darted toward me. Someone gasped. Jaime's confident smirk dissolved into something uncertain. Vivian straightened, the color draining from her face. But me, I just sat there frozen because those words, just that first sentence, shook something loose inside me. Something I didn't even know I'd been holding on to all this time. The priest continued, his voice softer now, more careful. To Elira, if you are there, then I am already surprised. I did not expect you would come. And if you didn't, I understand. I earned your absence. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard, I tasted blood. You were always the mirror I didn't want to look into. You reminded me too much of the parts of myself I had spent a lifetime trying to bury. Sensitivity, defiance, the need to be understood instead of obeyed. The room was dead silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Even the rain outside had softened, as if the whole world was listening with me. When you were born, I thought I had time to figure it out. How to love you, how to speak your language. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed quiet. I let the silence grow between us until it became its own living thing. Felt something burning in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, grief, the kind you feel not, just for what you lost, but for what you never had. I let others speak about you when I should have spoken up. I let them shape the story of who you were, angry, difficult, distant, because it was easier than admitting the truth. That I didn't know how to bother you, that I failed you. Aunt Vivian shifted in her seat, her arms crossed tight. Her face was blank, but her neck had flushed red. Jaime looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. I watched you walk out, of my life carrying every wound I gave you, and I did nothing. My eyes burned, but still no tears came. It was too deep for that. This wasn't release, it was recognition, and that was its own kind of ache. But I want you to know this. You were never my regret, not once. You were my lesson. You were my mirror. And if I had one more chance, I would have learned to love you better. My lip trembled. I dug my nails into my palms, grounding myself. The paper in Father Andrew's hand fluttered slightly as he turned to the second page. To Jaime, to Vivian, to those who thought they knew me, I allowed your version of me to stand because I was too much of a coward to defend who I really was. My silence was not approval. It was fear. And for that, I am sorry. That was the moment the air cracked. Jaime looked stunned. Aunt Vivian was stiff as stone. It was like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. And yet for me, it felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. To my daughter, if you hear this, I love you. I always did. I just didn't know how to show it. But I see you now. The letter ended, and with it, so did the story I had been told my whole life. The one where I was unwanted. The one where I was invisible. Because in that final moment, he saw me. I didn't move for a long time after the letter ended. The chapel was still. No one spoke, no one clapped, no one said his name. It was like everyone had been pulled into the same quiet space I was in, confused, raw, unsure what to do now that the story we'd all been telling ourselves had cracked wide open. The letter had left wreckage behind, not the kind you could sweep, up or smooth over, but the kind that forces people to see each other differently. I looked over at Aunt Vivian. Her eyes were locked on the pulpit, unmoving. She looked small, not angry, not triumphant, just lost. Jaime wasn't smirking anymore. He stared down at the floor, one hand fisted against his thigh. I wondered for a second what that letter meant to him, if it made him question everything the way I was questioning everything now. And my mother, she had tears in her eyes, quiet, barely there tears. She reached across Kyle and took my hand in hers. It was the first time we'd touched in years, and it didn't feel strange. It felt necessary. After the service, people left in awkward clusters. The usual small talk was gone. No one said much to me. A few avoided my eyes. Others, like Father Andrews, gave me a long, gentle look before walking away. I stayed behind, stood at the casket alone. I didn't speak out loud. I didn't need to. I just stood there, staring at the nameplate, letting the weight of everything settle into my bones. I wasn't angry anymore, not in that moment. What I felt was something quieter, sadder, regret maybe, but not mine. His. Because that letter, those words were too late, and I would never get the chance to see him mean them, never get to ask the questions that had lived in my chest for years, never get to watch his face soften when I walked into a room, never hear him say it in his own voice, but I got something. I got truth. And truth was more than I thought I'd ever get. I whispered 3 words I never expected to say. Not to him. I forgive you. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. I didn't want to carry that bitterness anymore. It had lived in me too long. It had shaped too much of who I became. Always bracing, always guarded, always trying to be worthy of someone who had already made up their mind. That ends here. After the burial, Kyle found me in the parking lot. We didn't say much, just leaned against my car, both of us facing forward. Finally, he said, "I think he meant it." I nodded. "I do too." Then he added, almost like a whisper, "You deserved better." I smiled for the first time that day. So did you. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But we stood there together longer than we ever had before, and that felt like something new. Later that night, I opened my suitcase and pulled out an old photograph I'd packed without thinking. It was me at 6 holding up a finger painting, bright, chaotic colors. My dad was in the background, blurry, unreadable. Now I looked at it differently. Maybe he was proud. Maybe he just didn't know how to show it. But I know this. I'm not invisible anymore. Not to him, not to me. And sometimes the dead say what the living never could. And when they do, it either breaks you or it sets you free. If this story resonated with you, even just a little, take a second to breathe with me. We all carry stories like this. Some are loud, some are buried deep, but they shape us. And sometimes sharing them is the only way to finally let go. If this made you feel something, please like the video. It really helps more people find it. And if you've ever been through something similar, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. I read them all and I mean that. Share this with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know who's silently carrying the same kind of hurt. And if you're new here, subscribe. I share real stories that cut deep, heal, slow, and speak the truth most people are afraid to say out loud. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You're not alone.